big a problem plastics are for our oceans. More than 8 million tons of plastic go into the world's oceans each year, and by the year 2050, we're projected to have more plastic in the ocean than fish. But fortunately, there are some incredible innovators out there committed to tackling this global issue. One of those innovators is Rodrigo Garcia Gonzalez. He is the co-founder and co-CEO of Notpla, a company that's working to revolutionize the packing industry. Would you please welcome him now, along with Desiree Fixler, for a fireside chat. Why don't we just sit here? Yeah, perfect. This is a real pleasure. I'm so excited to have this chat.
Same.
Your company, Notpla, which stands for Not Plastic, was founded, as we've just heard, to revolutionize the packaging industry, to provide a sustainable alternative, of course, to plastic. Your products are all natural, biodegradable, made from seaweed. And there's a vast range of uses for the products. Not to mention, of course, the immense positive environmental impact by tackling, of course, the plastic pollution problem. One thing to mention is Notpla is the recipient of a very prestigious award, environmental award, called, in 2022, they were the winner of the Earthshot Prize for building a waste-free world. So let's get down into it, and hopefully our conversation will light up the room. Please, can you tell us about Notpla's products? Almost sounds too good to be true. And the current uses, and at what stage is your company at?
Perfect, sure. So we have done a few different products. So the first product that we created, we call it O, and it's a membrane made out of seaweed that can contain liquid. And the interesting thing is that you can eat it. So if you want to have one, Desiree?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can cheers on the stage.
Should I?
So we have used it for things like the London Marathon, where we provide it to every runner. Cheers.
Okay. Oh, cheers. There we go. All right.
How is it?
It is a bit chewy. It's good. It is.
I think we'll have some of them afterwards for everyone to try if you want. So yeah, we started with this product. We started to package liquids. That is one of the hardest things to package in a really similar way that nature package any other type of liquid using membranes. Our membranes are made out of seaweed. Probably quite a lot of you know all the benefits from seaweed, but it grows quite fast. It desacidifies the ocean. And basically, we started to make the machinery to make these products back in a few years ago out of Imperial College London. And we got some funding from some people in the room to start to, thanks Jamie, to start a bit this adventure and yeah, to package different things. We started with things like water. We did Tropicana juice for events like Roland Garros. So we provide to everyone who attended the Roland Garros something similar to an orange. And then from there, we started to package ketchup for takeaway delivery. And there had been with a partnership with Just Eat, who is a takeaway delivery partner in the UK. And they asked us, besides the ketchup, can you do something else? Can you provide some solution for our takeaway boxes? So I don't know if people know, but takeaway boxes have this issue that they need a liner. They need a plastic liner or a coating in order to keep the food inside of the cardboard. And we said, yes, let's try to solve that. And we have been producing boxes now at a scale. So at the moment, we are in 8 different countries. Germany is our biggest market so far, followed by the UK, where we basically coat seaweed into the paper in large scale. So that had been one of the biggest achievements of the team this year. We were able to replace last year 3 million boxes instead of made from plastic, made out of from seaweed. And this year we are hopefully making up to 50 million boxes. So it's kind of like a really big jump for us in terms of scales. Besides that, we have been working with the team in other type of products. So we do flexible films for different things like food. In this case, you can put the package into into the...
And by the way, just to make the point, because I've tried it, there's no taste to it, so it's not going to change the flavor of the food. There's literally
no taste.
Yeah, there's no taste.
We have doing things like this is a little pipette for olive oil, and then you can control the dosage. So it's a bit like making fruits. You can still eat it if you want. Toothpaste pearls. So the applications are quite varied. It's a bit like making fruits instead of making plastic. And we try to find what type of seaweed is better for depending the properties that is needed. And yeah, that's what we are.
That's amazing. Now, we heard earlier about, green premiums. What's your price point like compared to plastic?
Sure. So in the boxes, that is the main product that we have at the moment, we are cost competitive with plastic at this point on time. So we sell at the same price, even if we manufacture in the UK. That is not the cheapest place to manufacture. Our boxes are cost competitive with those boxes made with PLA or other type of coating, which is great to achieve because we were only to achieve this year with big scale. So once you produce in the millions is when you start to lower the cost in the packaging world. It's a game of volumes. So you need to have that scale in order to provide that.
So, on a personal note, what inspired you to set the company up? Was there an event or a situation that drove you to take this type of action?
Well, my personal story is a bit varied. So I started as an architect, so nothing to do with this. And I worked in academia for many years, working a lot with plastic waste. So I was building different type of even bridges out of plastic bottles in different countries. And then I was working on a different project in Imperial College London. I was building some artificial clouds to deliver water where it's needed. So it was big balloons that you can put on the ocean and get the water from the sea in a vapor state, so you can elevate that water, same way that like clouds are formed, and then deliver that water where it was needed. And in that moment of trying to find solutions of delivering that water in a format that was not plastic, I started to experiment with different type of materials and membranes, and remember coming with the first bubble to my supervisor and say, "Ah, look what," and the supervisor is, "Rodrigo, your projects are the clouds, not the bubbles. Focus on the clouds." And then we didn't manage to. We made the first clouds. We were going to get some funding from Rolex at that point. That didn't went through. But we did some good progress with the bubbles, and we got some European Union funding, following with some investor funding that make the small project grow, and the bigger project shrink a bit.
That's so cool. I mean, you're talking about transforming packaging, and of course, there's a set industry. How has it been received? How has your alternative, your biodegradable, edible alternative, been received by large industrial companies, food companies, drink companies, and consumer goods companies?
Yeah, so we need to work with big companies, basically to have an impact. At the same time, some of the big corporations that sell sometimes products in plastic, they are benefiting from the status quo that there is at the moment. So it's quite hard to make that change. Right. They have adapted their supply chain and their times to that material. And we believe that plastic is an amazing material at the same time. Like it works really well. It performs amazing. They have like super barrier properties. The big mismatch that we see is that the time of use that we give it is a material that's going to be 700 years out there, and we use it for a matter of a few minutes. So it's where we need to do as change. And coming back to the question, we have been working, or we are working with big corporations. Normally we have the internal thought that they are like big elephants, so they take big time to move. But yeah, once they are in motion, hopefully something could happen. At the moment, we're working with a few. Out of the public ones, we're working with Decathlon, so we are launching 5 products in the market this year with them, which is exciting. We have a few things with Unilever that they had been done in the past, a few things with PepsiCo, a few things with a few on cosmetic side that we cannot talk too much about it. But I think it's interesting. All of these, yeah, it takes a long time, and the R&D cycles that these companies have are 5-10 years. Right. I was speaking with R&D team in a FMCG company. I'm not going to mention who, and they say like just to launch a cookie it took them 10 years. So imagine to launch a new material or a revolutionary idea of you can eat your packaging. It's a bit sometimes takes a few times.
They're feeling the urgency to take action. So that's really good to hear. Now moving to what governments can do and how governments can accelerate this transformation. Certain governments have passed restrictions on the use of single-use plastics, like here in the EU, the UK, India, and in the US, the state of California. Have they gone far enough, and are they being enforced? And then finally, what else can governments do?
Yes, so I think there is quite a lot of movement lately, which is good, around single-use plastics legislation happening in different parts. There's different bets, so a lot of the bets from the European Union are in basically reusing and recycling. There's sometimes that I think reusing makes sense in quite a lot of places, especially setups like this. You don't need an ojo to drink. You can have a water glass, so completely agree on that. In other cases, recycling is not an option. For example, in the case of ketchup sachets, you cannot reuse it, you cannot recycle. So we think like compostables in that case is a good way to go. We have been working with governments ourselves, so we have run a pilot this year in Chile, sponsored by DEFRA, that is the UK department. And we have been running a pilot in Ghana, in Africa, sponsored by the UN, basically to replace water sachets. And I think, I think it's a push not only from governments, but as well from consumers, from big companies, from innovators, to try to accelerate this change that I think we need it. And I always say that like we had the solution in the past, so we had been living without plastic for many centuries, and we have been able to eat, to consume, to trade without the need of this material. So we do have these solutions. Most of the time are not in the forms of new materials, are forms of systems or reusables or specific ways of doing things. And I think we should revisit some of those.
You know, it's a very good point. You know, so often like we blame industry, we blame government, but you know, we ourselves need to do our bit, right? So we consumers need to change our patterns and our preferences. So we've heard all about your products, and they're certainly innovative and environmentally friendly. But you know, take a company like Tesla. Right? So we know that they're revolutionizing and they've scaled electric vehicles. But there's been some criticisms of Tesla that maybe they're not so carbon light on the production of their cars. So for your business, do you also address your carbon footprint with regard to production and distribution? And so are you minimizing your production emissions as well as minimizing water use and waste?
Yes, we try to do our best from our space or from our role. An example of that, for example, from the seaweed, from the biomass, 20% of that seaweed gets extracted to this form of hydrocolloid that we use in different products to make the ojo or to make the films. And the rest is a fiber that until now we have not been using. And last year we started to make a seaweed paper. So basically it's a paper that is made out of seaweed, out of that fiber that before was a waste. And at the moment, we're selling that paper for quite a lot of different products. Have advantages against other type of fiber because seaweed doesn't have lignin, that is this component of the trees that you need to remove to get the cellulose. So it's better in terms of like carbon emissions. And and in other forms, we try to track as much as we can all the carbon emissions of our products. It's something that we are trying to use as a selling point to some of the companies that we work with, but at the same time for improving ourselves. So we have an impact team at the moment in-house trying to track where our main carbon emissions or resource come from, and we try to reduce them as much as we can.
Cool. So we're talking about seaweed. Studies have shown that seaweed is many times more effective at carbon capture than plants. So how can you want to use as much seaweed as possible. I tasted it and I'm seeing it, this is an incredible and a needed alternative. But at the same time, you don't want to diminish the supply of seaweed. especially for dependent local communities and the ecosystem. So how do you strike that balance in using seaweed, but also not disrupting the ecosystem?
Sure, we're trying to support as well from our role. So we don't grow seaweed. I know some of the people in the audience do. We have been supporting and trying to use our buying power as well to support best practice on seaweed cultivation. So we have invested, for example, a little bit in a seaweed farm in Wales called Carrymore, that they work quite nicely in terms of seaweed management. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we try to understand as well what type of biomass or seaweeds at the moment are not in use. So those algae blooms that we sometimes see in terms of sargassum, etc. We're trying to see if we can give them a use and try to understand almost each community what is the best use that we have for that biomass and try to answer those needs. We think as well that there is not only seaweed in terms of biomass, so we are using more and more, for example, fruit peels or residues from other biomass. So there is this company, for example, we collaborated now in Spain. They do almonds, so they do all the almonds that they get shipped to the UK, and we integrate the skin of the almonds into the packaging as well. So we make a flexible film that is half seaweed, half almonds, to contain almonds. So we always believe on this idea of circularity in that way.
Well, on that point, the seaweed obviously is around the world. How are you sourcing your seaweed, and do you bring it back to the UK? Or, is there a plan for your company actually to engage with local communities and actually produce the packaging locally so that there is less of a distribution of scope 3 emissions, and also it's an opportunity for job creation and wealth creation locally? So how are you planning your local community engagement for your company?
Sure. So I think we are relatively small. We are 74 people. So we only have a relatively local impact, being like UK and Europe. Most of our seaweed gets sourced in Europe. So we try to do our best, even if it's a higher price, to source seaweed as local as we can. We are exploring other seaweeds from many other resources or many other regions. But yes, once we start to have a global impact in other regions, we try to plan to have local production in those areas. We plan to be a bit like, we're a B2B2C company, so we plan to provide technology and packaging materials to other companies that at the moment use plastic and empower them to produce without it. And we are starting now to have plans for our Series B that is going to focus in expanding to the US. And that will involve at the beginning shipping from the UK, which is not the most efficient way to do things. But once the validation is there and the consumer's adoption is there, we hopefully optimize that fairly quickly.
So what can we do as consumers to help the proliferation of eradicating single-use plastics? So let's just fast forward to 10 years. How do you envision your products being scaled in the market, and how might things be different for us with regard to, as an example, food and drink?
So I suppose in terms of food and drink, it's a bit having common sense, and I think we do have quite a lot of solutions in order not to use plastic. So sometimes it's a bit not being lazy about things. Sometimes it's about adopting different systems or different solutions that there's out there. But as well, there is some space, I think, for new things. We don't claim that we have the solution for everything. We do see that we have some solutions for small consumption or small volumes in instant consumption, things like marathons, things like takeaway. We are quite similar to fruits, so where a fruit could work, that fruit has been working in many different occasions, we have a say. At the moment, we are not focusing on replacing a bottle that can last for 3 years in a supermarket shelf because we don't believe it's our space or the material. In order to biodegrade really quickly, it needs to have a certain shelf life, even the packaging. So that's our focus at the moment.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that. That was enlightening. Thank you again,
Thank
Rodrigo. And best of luck. And look out for NotPla.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, Rodrigo. I'm sure everyone's looking forward to tasting those. What flavor were they? What was it?
I promised.
Oh, elderflower. All
Lovely.
right, everyone be prepared. A little bit of elderflowers coming your way. Desiree, stay here. It's time for our final panel of this Ocean Innovators platform. This is a panel that I'm sure is going to provoke a lot of discussion, a lot of questions. This is about AI in the deep blue, data and discovery. Would you please welcome with me now the panelists, Joost Den Haan from Plan Blue, George Richards from Community Jamil, Philippe Dupré from Laval, Courtney Opshong from Blue Ocean Gear, and Jean-Marc Timos from Semantic TS. Let's give them a round of applause.
Can you get in? Okay, thank you guys. I'm really excited about this panel as well. So as we've heard, all right, with regard to the oceans, we lack data. And that's a huge barrier to addressing key issues such as overfishing and biodiversity loss. But new technologies, thankfully, are coming to the rescue, transforming the way we understand and manage our ocean. So we're going to hear from our expert panelists on this session the latest developments taking place in this sector. I'm first going to go through, just very briefly, I'll introduce each of our panelists. We have Jean-Marc Timos, and let me just get your very, very esteemed bio. Jean-Marc is the CEO of Semantic TS, and his company focuses on oceanography, underwater acoustics, software development, and AI dedicated to the monitoring of maritime environment. Next to Jean-Marc is Professor Philippe Dupré, and he is an advanced computing specialist with expertise in digital infrastructures and fair compliant research data management. Courtney Opshong is the CEO of Blue Ocean Gear, a tech company providing smart buoys, as we say in the States, but I think in the UK they say buoys, for commercial fishing fleets to track gear on the ocean, as well as deliver mission-critical data. We have Joost Den Haan, the CEO and co-founder of Plan Blue, which developed a novel seafloor monitoring technology to ground truth aerial and satellite imagery to help unlock the blue carbon industry. And then finally, George Richards is the director of Community Jamil, an independent global organization advancing science and learning to understand and address pressing human challenges, including climate change. Okay, so here we go. Joost, I'm going to start off with you. I think we were going to have a visual at some point, but let's see if it hits the screen. Now, water covers about 70% of the Earth's surface, yet we know very little about what's happening below. Amongst other things, Plan Blue's technology maps the ocean floor. Why is it vital to do this, to baseline, track, and also health check the ocean floor?
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's really great to be here. I think the answer is quite simple. If you look outside and you look towards the ocean, you actually don't see the seafloor, which covers 70% of our planet. And it's such a huge, important area for so many different reasons. And visualizing that in a very standardized and objective way is really important to make informed decisions. And yeah, we really lack also a good understanding of why it is so important down there, because we don't live there. And because we don't live there, it's difficult to interpret what we're actually seeing. I also had a very similar story what I heard Nico Rosberg say today. I had that experience myself when I was a diver. I'm still a diver, and going to the seafloor and seeing actually what it's like and what it shouldn't be like, and somebody else confirming, hey, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen, whereas the coral reef was 98% dead. And that for me was a really big realization. Okay, there's some really important data that we're missing of the seafloor, because ultimately the seafloor has huge economic and ecological value. It has one of the best atmospheric carbon sequesters we know down there, like seagrasses, which we need to protect, and they're a super important nature-based solution to help get the CO2 out of the atmosphere as quickly as possible. And bottom line, we need really good, high-quality data for that.
Okay, thank you very much. Jean-Marc, can you please discuss Symantec's technology and the use of artificial intelligence to collect ocean data and its applications to both the public and private sectors?
Okay, so basically our core business is to use this sound to better understand the marine environment. To do that, we use acoustics to monitor the environment. And indeed, using acoustics is definitely the privileged way to infer the environment because, as you probably know, electromagnetic signals are strongly attenuated by the water, whereas acoustics can travel hundreds of kilometers. So based on that, we provide services, software, and products to better analyze everything related to underwater. From that, we've developed some algorithm for the French Navy to classify the signal, because the first thing that springs to mind when it comes to measuring using sound is obviously the sounder. And the sounder is quite simple. It's the travel time of the sound wave to travel to reach the bottom and to come back. But if you go deeper in the signal, then you can have a tremendous amount of information about what's at the bottom of the ocean. Is it sand? Is it rock? Is it vegetation? And all that is possible with algorithmics and signal processing. So we have developed and sold such a technology for the French Navy, and it's used on a regular basis to analyze the sea bottom and to build the sediment map of the ocean. And then we decided to switch to shallow water monitoring and environmental purposes, using basically the same techniques, but adapted to shallow water. This is especially important for the following of the Posidonia meadow. As you probably know, it's a huge carbon sink, and there's a lot of regulation nowadays to control and to restrict the moving of the ships, for instance. And we have definitely to know whether it's useful or not. And to do that, we need figures. And to have these figures, we can use this technology to monitor to see if it has decreased, if the Posidonia meadow is spreading or not, if the policy are efficient or not. And spoiling alert, they are efficient. But we need figures to do that. Yet this process is a very time-consuming process. It implies heavy logistics. It implies people traveling by car, by boat. And that's why we don't have the visual. Okay, that's why we had the idea to propose a suitcase, basically, a connected suitcase that can do exactly the same thing that from the French Navy, classify the bottom of the ocean. Obviously, getting the depths using bathymetry, the temperature, and a lot of information from the seabed using this technology. This way, it can be operated remotely by lightly trained operators, and the data is sent back to our cloud servers where they are processed by our expert team, and hence we can have information about the seabed.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to get to Courtney and George. They also have technological initiatives to collect ocean data. Before I do, I'd like to hear from Philippe about, we have so many initiatives here in collecting ocean data, but these are different puzzle pieces, right? How can you put the puzzle pieces together to get a clear picture view? So, can you please explain the fair research principle and the use and how that can be applied to standardize ocean data and make it accessible for the general public?
Yeah, sure. Well, the fair data management and stewardship principles were crystallized in a paper in 2016 in Nature that was cited 9,000 times so far, so that's a lot of citation. That followed discussion between several research communities, including those interested in web semantic questions. And FAIR, it's an acronym. It stands for data being findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And the overarching goal of FAIR data is to preserve the value of the data over time. And it's very important, especially in the ocean sector, because the data you generate, you collect, is typically very expensive to acquire. I'm sure that the instrumentation used by Joost or by Jean-Marc is state of the art. So you really want to keep the value of this data over time. And in order to achieve that, you have to make the data fair. And I'll just go over quickly each of the letter of the acronym to give you an idea of what it means to make your data fair. So first, the F for findable. And basically it means that your data should be findable by search engines such as Google dataset search. And that means that when Google is crawling the web, it should find information about your data products. So basically, who made it, who is the data owner, when it was acquired, with which instrumentation, and so forth. So the idea of FAIR principle is to document as much as possible your data so that other user, whether human or machine user, can really understand what the data is about. The A for accessible is relatively straightforward, means that you should not use proprietary technology or protocols or format to access and read the data. And I will just mention something about the accessible aspect of FAIR. Accessible doesn't mean that your data should be free and open, okay? Heavily protected data can be fair. Basically what you need in that case is a way, a mechanism so that people can reach out to you and ask for collaboration, for example. And the I for interoperable means that you should stick to standards, ontologies, control vocabularies, terminologies to describe your data. From what I understand, in the ocean sector, physical measurements are quite standardized, but I was discussing with Joost earlier, and all the biodiversity and all the biology-related data are not as standardized as physical data. And finally, the R for reusable is the goal of the FAIR principle, allows other to reuse the data again. And that would be my message today. If you are a data holder, data owner, just take a step back, give a little bit fair love to your data so that other can also use them in the future.
Thank you very much. That's what needs to be done for sure, but of course, you have private, for-profit companies, and of course, some of your clients might not want the data to go out freely. So there's a natural conflict, right, between acquiring the data by certain private companies and making it accessible. Courtney, can you please start off by explaining Blue Ocean Gear's technology and also address this challenge of integrating data and making it accessible for the general public for sharing?
Sure. So our smart buoy technology was developed primarily to track fishing gear out on the ocean. By tracking gear, we can help reduce gear loss, which is a tremendous problem. Over 75% of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is due to fishing-related sources. Over 30% of marine species have been impacted by ghost fishing. So if you can track something out on the ocean, you're less likely to lose it. But we've, with our additional sensor suite on the buoys, we can now provide, not just where their gear is, but what's going on with it out on the water. So we can tell fishermen whether their gear was washed away by a storm, whether it was entangled by a marine mammal, was it dragged under by tides or strong current. It helps them with their operations, and we can provide data analytics for these customers that give them a better idea of what's happened seasonally Was their gear sliced off by gear conflict, even whether their gear was poached or gear theft during the season. So all of this is a very powerful tool for our initial hardware customers, but we are primarily a data company. As we do own the data, but we recognize that that the fishermen are very protective of what that data is and where they fish. But this is such an opportunity here to have gear that's already out on the ocean and being able to collect data for other industries that are adjacent to the fishing industry. So a lot about our company has been to develop relationships with our customers, build up that trust, and now they actually ask to share the data, because a lot of the data products that we're able to provide can actually help support the fishing industry as well. So better meteorological predictions, or offshore wind where there's co-location with the fishing industry. Getting data from that region in a spatial resolution that's required can actually help with deconflict some of those situations.
Thank you very much. George, Community Jamil, of course, is focused on many different sustainable development goals. But I'm going to focus on one project that's actually here in Monaco. You're sponsoring this innovative project here in Monaco to deploy underwater systems to assess marine life in the sea. Could you tell us how your data collection will help conserve marine life and decrease biodiversity loss here, and how you're interacting with your local partners?
Thank you very much. I think the first point is, my esteemed colleagues have spoken about the importance of data and very innovative new technologies. What was exciting to us was the opportunity to test and start to advance recording systems that could be rapidly scaled globally, including into harder to reach and low resource settings around the world. The baited remote underwater video systems you mentioned, Desiree, BRUVs, they're pretty basic. There's a sort of metal rig of about 3 struts. There's a box with some bait in, and then there are these cameras. So they're relatively inexpensive. They're easily assembled and disassembled, easy to operate, and can be, as I said, deployed into difficult contexts. They're very robust. That's the thing that excited us, is how can we start to scale up these technologies and get them around the world? Why Monaco? Well, Community Jamil, as you mentioned, we're an institution that supports science and research. We do quite a bit of work in the climate change space, but we're new entrants into the oceans world. And so we were looking for trusted and experienced partners, and who better than the Fondation Prince Albert II de Monaco and the Monegasque Association for the Protection of Nature. But also, I think we took inspiration from Monaco's long history as a laboratory, as a great place for experimentation and testing of new innovations and technologies. And so our hope is that through this pilot project, we can then look to continue to scale up the deployment of these technologies around the world.
Thank you so much. Joost, what is your view on this challenge of data sharing, for the general, public benefit? And then I'm going to ask you a second question on what's needed to scale up data collection. But the first one, your view on data integration and sharing.
Yeah, sure. I would have loved to show my image, because I really believe in visualizations and visualizing how important the seafloor is on multiple levels. But anyway, you can check it out on planblue.com. It has a similar. Oh, there it is. Wonderful.
There you go.
So yeah, this is an image that we took with our underwater monitoring technology that combines AI with underwater navigation and advanced imaging, including hyperspectral. So what you see at the bottom is a piece of seagrass that we actually monitor not far from here in France. And what you are able to do by using AI, you can automatically detect what we're actually looking at, so that everybody can understand, am I looking at seagrass, colored in green? Is it something else, colored in yellow? And then you can also go other levels above it. And one very important indicator is health. Because we can talk about, okay, there's so much seagrass, there's 50% seagrass or whatsoever. that only says so much if you know if it is actually in a good state or not. Because if you have a good, healthy seagrass, it means you're looking at the carbon sequester. If you're not looking at, if you look at an unhealthy one, then you're looking at the carbon emitter, so to say. And I think it's very important to visualize this, and this also comes to sharing data. I think that's really important to share the importance of the C4. But I also must admit that it really depends on the type of customer that you work with. Because some customers will just not want to, share their data. If you, for example, monitor in an offshore wind area and you're looking at corrosion of pillars or whatsoever, they will probably not be inclined to share that data that potentially goes to the competitor. So it's always it's a trade-off, but it's something that you need to discuss up front before you do a project. You say, hey, our intent is to actually share the data. I think that's really important. If they don't want that yet, then that affects the price ultimately. But it should be the goal to make data available, because it's really the power in data is in combining different data sets with one another. What we provide is one piece of the puzzle. But the pieces of puzzles together, that's really where you get your ultimate value. We really focus on high detailed data, which you then ground truth to larger scale data sets. So satellite imagery becomes more usable, aerial imagery or drone imagery that you get becomes more usable, because ultimately it needs to like to scale. You need to create large maps, lots of information, so you can make good informed decisions in an objective way.
So what incentives are there, to get private companies to release that data and effectively scale up the data collection? What about incentives like blue carbon or biodiversity credits? Would that help?
I think especially for blue carbon credits and biodiversity credits, it's very important to be transparent and to be aware, okay, how do we calculate carbon stock? How do we calculate the diversity? Because if you have very rough estimations of what's going on, you run into the chance that the value of your credits is only so much. And so that's why I think it's very important to be transparent how you get to that point. That's also what we're trying to do at Plan Blue. Really show, okay, we first scan a certain C4 area. We say, okay, what percentage, if this is seagrass, how healthy is that related to stock, so you can very clearly get to a number. And I think that level of transparency is especially important with the whole carbon credits. I mean, we've seen what happened with certain projects in the past few months. Good data quality transparency is really important.
Well, on that one, talking about that, Jean-Marc, how can we ensure that we have reliable data sets? Does AI help data objectivity and reliability?
Okay, so ensuring the reliability of data is a complex task, but it is critical, and it is true that a lot of environmental and political decisions are based upon these records. So this is critical to have, not to compare apple and pears, to have the tracking of every parameter that has been used to collect the data. And quite often, on the maps available on the web, you don't have this information. So we have to track everything to record. This is a complex task.
I'm just going to point out that your visual is here.
So too late. Too late. Okay. To do that, we have to ensure two things. First, the precision of the survey. Precision is where the data is located on Earth. We're using GPS, of course, but a lot of techniques. You have to precisely put the data. Then the resolution. This is basically the size of the pixel. This is really important. And if we want, for instance, to compare the efficiency of a policy regarding the mooring of the yacht and to see if it helps protecting the Posidonia meadow, we compare, for instance, two surveys made 10 years apart. The first one with a device that has a 10-meter precision, and the last one with a 1-meter precision because it's a better hardware. And we want to get information from that. You can hardly get any relevant information for this comparison. And yet, it is, unfortunately, the way the decision process are made this way today. So we have to explain people how to compare data, to use it. To your second question, how to use AI to, and does it help to better know if the data is reliable or not? Well, first idea is On the contrary, AI needs a lot of labeled and reliable data to train the neural models. It's like learning, making a machine learn is like teaching a kid. It's basically carrot and stick methodology. And to explain what's the expected right answer, you have to collect a lot of ground truth. This is what's expected for the machine, so that you can say wrong or right. As a parent, for the ground truth, you can check Google or more hype ChatGPT. But as an oceanographer or an hydrographer, to check this, you need to send divers or to use technology, for instance, to have ground truth about that. So, but this is a hard process, and the data, even if we have AR, even more if we have ER, is critical, and reliable data needs that. On the other way around, once the neural network is trained efficiently on a given context, then it can be a virtuous circle, because it can help detect what we hold to be true and is not regarding the ground truth. The human, they make mistake. So sometimes the artificial intelligence can detect, and up to now, for instance, we are 96% of success with automation artificial intelligence. And sometimes the machine can see stuff that a human being cannot see. So this way we can, it's a virtuous cycle. Machine helps human, and human helps machine. It's important to notice, I would like to add this, we often heard that 5% of the ocean is known, is mapped. But we have to keep in mind that the objective is not to map 100%. At least it should not be the final objective, because it's just a snapshot. And what is required is a continuous endeavor to monitor and to compare, to know the evolution of the seabed. And the seabed is changing. The seagrass is disappearing. There is coral reef disappearing. So we should invest in technology to ensure that we have, in the long term, in the repeatable way, the techniques and the methodology to follow the evolution, and not only a snapshot.
Understood. Courtney, I'm going to move to you, and we're going to move to government. How can government weigh in on the solutions here? So, of course, governments need reliable data to make better informed decisions. So, how could, as an example, your data help regulatory agencies in fisheries and adjacent ocean industries for better policy making?
Sure. If it's possible to get the visual up, that'd be great too. I think we use the term ocean data very, very broadly, and I think when we look at decisions that are being made in ocean industries, we have to look at what decisions are being made, what data do we need, and how, and where does that data need to come from. This image here is these images here are from the snow crab fishery in New Brunswick, Canada. This is a fishery that is under very tight scrutiny because of whale entanglement aspects of that are occurring in the fishery. Before last year, there was no data coming in from the fishery. Fishermen were setting their gear, and at the end of the season, like that, it's a very much technology had not really come into that fishery. So last season we had 150 smart buoys out with a single customer collecting data from the fishing gear. This year we'll have almost 300 buoys out with multiple customers. This is information that then they had agreed to share this with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. It can help inform fisheries of where the fishing effort is, what's going on in the fishery, how that gear can be managed, how to make better decisions. I think we have to look at the quality of the data, and also, again, the spatial resolution and the temporal resolution of when we're getting that data and how it's being used. Machine learning is a great example. It's only as good as the data that you're feeding in. And so whether it's for fisheries or for other industries that are dependent on ocean data, we have to look at what data we're really collecting and how it's disseminated. And the more, this is, for a lot of these, the case is, yes, the more data we get, the better, but we do have to be very careful in how we go about that.
Okay, thank you. Philippe, so we're discussing challenges of standardizing, collecting, and integrating data. How can the Blue community best overcome these hurdles? And is there another industry that provides a model example, an industry where we can learn from, where they successfully share data?
Yeah, there are indeed several barriers to data sharing and integration. I come from a background in the medical sector, and the largest barrier there is the fact that you are handling personal information, so it's difficult to share that. In the ocean sector, the barrier is mostly related to the fact that at some point somebody paid for the data, and the data owner might not want to share. And when your client is the Navy, for instance, you cannot share it by contract. So there are ways around that, not around that, but I mean to address this. I guess the first step is, just making the data findable. So the F in fair is a big step, because now you are telling the world, well, I have this data, and you describe the data products. You don't, put the data on the web for everybody to consume, but at least people know that these data product exists. So that's the first step. Another way, and this is used increasingly in the medical sector, we do what we call distributed analysis or federated learning. So basically what you do is, instead of transferring data to third party, you ask the third party to come with the analysis to your data. So basically, you never lose control over your data, and you can always control the data usage. So basically, in a federated learning fashion in artificial intelligence, the model goes from one institution to the other, but the data is never transferred to a party to another. So that gives confidence to all parties, so that everything is under control. So in the medical sector, that works great, and I'm pretty sure that the Blue Water community can adapt and adopt these practices. And last, I guess we have to recognize that the largest successes in data standardization and integration were led by the private sector. When we think about, the consumer electronic market, where you have companies, rival companies that are coming together, developing standard. For example, the HDMI standard that you all know was developed by Sony, Philips, Hitachi, Panasonic. And I guess the same should also happen in the ocean sector. So the idea is that when you band together like this, everybody will benefit in the long run. And that would be another message for you. Try to bring together the private and the public sector to develop these standards that we need to move forward.
Okay, thank you. George, you work with various stakeholders, including policymakers, scientists, local communities, to also address the needs of the global South. How can technology play a role to ensure their vital needs are being met? And the second question I have, and I'll open it up for everyone else to weigh in on, is the question about the recently signed UN Treaty for High Seas. Did it go far enough?
Thank you very much. Yeah, so as well as our Monaco partners on the project I was talking about earlier, we're also working with Blue Abacus, which is an Australian company set up by researchers at the University of Western Australia, and Fishbase, which is an incredible institution in Manila in the Philippines, which is cataloging and monitoring fish and other marine life for the world. And we need more fish-based type institutions. We need to have greater coverage, greater participation by researchers and scientists around the world. We need a distributed model. If we're going to cover the vast ocean, all the seas, we need researchers not just in the global north, but also in the global south. That requires science funding to be deployed differently. We've heard a lot about how SDG 14 is the most poorly funded of the SDGs, but a lot of the SDG 14 funding that there is going to the global north, and we need to see more scientists, researchers, centers of excellence, networks of researchers all over the world. That will improve the ability of us all to measure and gather data for what's happening in the seas. And I would go further to say that it's not just sort of hard data, binary numbers, binary data, numbers, and so on. It's also traditional knowledge and indigenous wisdom that needs to be incorporated into the broad data sets that inform our understanding of the health of the oceans. To the point about the High Seas Treaty, we were greatly pleased to see that indigenous communities were included and highlighted throughout, and there was a focus on technology transfer and the support, funding supports for researchers and scientists around the world. And for us as Community Jameel, we're an institution from the Global South. Our founders were from Saudi Arabia, and as we head towards COP28, this is the theme that we're centering in the UN framework, in UN discussions to ensure that at COP28, the importance of South-South collaborations, funding for scientists, researchers, indigenous communities is part of the COP28 agenda in Dubai later this year.
That's fantastic, because that is possible. You can engage in collecting this research, local communities, to help with the research, as well as benefit from it locally. Can I, staying on the UN Treaty for High Seas, I would love to open it up to the rest of you guys just to hear your views. Did we go far enough there? And also, let's ask that very important question. What are your views? Will it be enforced? We see a lot of times, there are a lot of big pledges being made, but not so often the delivery. And we've had some letdowns after, COP 26, and we're waiting to see what will happen after COP 27. But what's your view on this latest treaty? Anybody can jump in.
I can start, I suppose. And I think this definitely, and I'll relate it back to, of course, data. But the global treaty there's a lot of wonderful goals that were stated. I think one of the things that building on what George and Philippe have said, this is a global treaty. The oceans are obviously all connected, but there are so many different communities that are dependent on this, and so many different countries involved. But making that data accessible to everyone is going to be the challenge. How do we know that we achieved those goals? And how do we share the fact that we've achieved those goals? And how do we share the data that's coming in? And so I think this is where we get to there's no just one data source that's going to answer all these questions for us. It's going to take all sorts of information and data coming in and being amalgamated. It gets back to the question about standardization, but there's certainly going to be a community of data that comes together to help answer some of these questions and make sure that hold everyone accountable. I think that's where we go.
Okay, fantastic. And can I ask, Joost and Jean-Marc, again, with regard to this treaty, are you also, following how this was going to be enforced? Are we on the right pathway to achieve these goals? 2030 is just around the corner. Can your technology, help, monitor, the progress in achieving this goal?
So in terms of our technology, we focus mainly on the coastal areas and not the high seas. So there's a difference there. But the technology itself can, of course, also be used in the deep sea if it's necessary. It really depends on the housing and the lighting that you use, because the optical solutions can also be used deeper down. But I agree that it's all about how it's being implemented, how it's going to be monitored, how it's going to be transferred, the information that's actually making sense, and not that it's going to end up in paper parks.
Like Joost, most of our activity are in shallow waters. So, but we used to work for a big project to monitor the potential impact of mining and the noise it can generate with Ifremer, with the Naval Group. So it was a big project, and it probably contributed to the fact that whatever it was before the decision was made to stop the mining, at least in France. But I think more and more people are aware that it has an impact on the marine life, and it has to be monitored. So there's a lot of technology to help recording, modeling the way the human can impact the marine life. This is a good thing. Is this enough? It's never enough. And anyway, it's the only way. The regulation is the only way. We can't rely on the goodwill of people. So unfortunately, regulation is always a good way to prepare the future.
What are other government levers? So we know, there are MPAs that can be put in place. What else can the government do to help protect marine life? More MPAs?
I'll take a stab. I mean, and even MPAs, I mean, they still require the monitoring and policies that are enforced with MPAs vary depending on the region. I think that's part of what we need to see is more adaptable enforcements depending on the region, depending on the marine life that are local to those areas. I think there certainly are there's very different levers that can be pulled depending on the type of countries or communities that are engaged. Whether they are focused on where we allow certain industries to operate, whether it's fishing or shipping or offshore wind, those are all going to have to be looked at very differently, and the impacts studied on the marine life.
Okay. And I think as well as restricting activities in certain areas and enforcing those restrictions, there's also an important role to be played for incentives and finding ways to engage communities and whether it's in the high seas, fishing, or in coastal waters, local communities, to ensure that the incentives are structured in such a way that the outcomes are positive for the health of the ocean and the seas. Another research center, the Community Jameel, has supported for many years the Abdulatif Jameel Poverty Action Lab, JPAL, at MIT in the US. They've conducted randomized control trials on the effectiveness of incentives in forestry management in places like Uganda and in Latin America. And so there's a lot of good literature in the policy space of what works when it comes to incentives that I think learnings and lessons can be taken from for the management of the seas and oceans. So I think there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of joining the dots and ensuring that policy making is informed by data and evidence.
Okay, thank you. So, there have been many biodiversity pledges being made, obviously net zero pledges. The UN Principles of Responsible Investing came out with a report, The Inevitable Policy Response. So looking at, our pathway to 2030, this is going to be an open question, but this is our last question before we open it up to the audience for questions. What does the future bring here, right? It sounds like we're not doing enough. I mean, thankfully, there's awareness of the problems. We have technology that needs to be scaled. So what does the future look like? Because there's going to be, we're coming close to a tipping point. So, I would love to hear, just to wrap up the session, your views on what will 2030 look like? Will we achieve our goals? Or are you optimistic that we're going to reverse the destruction?
Okay, so optimistic, we have to be. Honestly, when I was a kid, I used to swim. I'm from the area. I used to swim, and we didn't know that the water was really polluted. It's getting better and better, so we can do it. We have to say it. It's better and better. And the more we monitor, the more we know where it is polluted. So things can get better. So we have to be optimistic. The problem is that there is also a crisis coming, and when money is at stake, unfortunately, the environment is probably not the most important to other people. And this way we could be pessimistic, but we have to be optimistic for the kids. we have.
Philippe.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm optimistic because what I see is that people are collaborating in the data field, especially. We see those barriers kind of falling right now. People are willing to share, willing to collaborate because they feel that this is an urgent matter. So I guess, at least in the scientific community, I am optimistic for the future that we will probably get a very nice solution to these problems. Science is one part of the equation. The other one would be funding at some point. Yeah.
Absolutely. Courtney?
Well, I think it's just inspiring to have seen all of the technology that's been presented today. I think there's a tremendous amount of effort being put forth in so many different areas of the ocean that that's certainly optimistic and from my point of view. And yeah, then it comes down, as you said, to funding. And so I think we have a lot of momentum in that direction, and so we just need to keep going forward.
Great. Yes.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think the power of monitoring and visualization is also that you can show success. If you have a marine protected area that you actually successfully protect and say, hey, we can actually get this done, we can also use that blueprint for other places. So I think there's also a lot of value there. And we have to be optimistic because we don't have a choice.
I'm with you. George?
I would say hope for the best, prepare for the worst. There is good momentum, as Courtney said, but we've got to keep it up. You know, the High Seas Treaty now has to be ratified. So we have to maintain political pressure and momentum through the UN system and other channels. We have to ensure that the great technologies that my esteemed fellow panelists are discussing is deployed more widely. We invest, as I was saying,
And get the funding there.
Get the funding there, exactly,
Yeah.
in science and scientists and researchers around the world. And finally, we do have to prepare for the fact that some climate change variations may be non-reversible. And therefore, there's an important role for adaptation to what the future looks like, particularly for those communities most at risk.
That's a very, very important point to make. We have to be focused on adaptation as well. So thank you so much. So now we're going to open it up for the audience. So please raise your hand if you have any questions for our expert panel.
Hi, thanks. It's Richard Seeley. I run Open Waters Club out of Geneva, which is effectively a platform to bring funds to the most promising ocean innovations. But my question to the panel, and I'll just throw it out to the panel if that's okay. What I didn't hear this afternoon, and I thought I would hear more of, was the use of predictive analytics, things like digital twins, and those tools, and whether you see those tools as playing a role in this cause.
Well, I can go first. AI promised a lot, delivered not that much so far, but it is changing. We are in a point where the models are very mature and resilient and so forth, but the data is lacking, high quality data to train these models. And I guess we are at this tipping point where we are going from a model-based AI to a data-centric AI. And I guess that, with companies as a Semantic or companies by Yoast, they generate a lot of high-quality data that can train models, and then you can go to the predictive power of AI.
I can add something. Regarding digital twins, it's very useful and used when it comes to monitoring infrastructures, underwater infrastructures, and the technology is ready for that. It's more problematic when you want to have a digital twin of wide areas, big areas like the ocean, because, as mentioned, collecting data at sea is really expensive, and it's really big, so it's hard to expect something that enables us to do some prediction from digital twin on a larger scale. But for infrastructure, it's used a lot.
Okay. Are there any more audience questions? Because we do have some questions online. Perhaps we can move to the online questions.
The question was, there you go. The question was, could you be more specific on your business models? How do you transform data collection into a profitable business?
I can start. We are a 30-years-old company, so we are profitable, and our business model is quite simple. We're doing services, and we are data processor mainly. So our expertise is processing data and taking the most of the signal.
Yeah, well, I'm from academia, so I don't really have a business model. So.
We're fortunate in that we can actually sell our hardware, but then we have a recurring data subscription fee, and then third-party data customers also have a fee.
Yeah, so we have actually, as a startup, gone through various cycles of what makes the most sense commercially for us. So initially thinking of selling the hardware, which was not a good idea, and then thinking of subscription models, but in the end, what we do is we sell data. So we do sell data to customers from geospatial industry, for example, that want to help improve their own data sets. That's the direction we follow right now.
Well, similar to Philippe, we fund scientific research, so this is not really one for us.
Can we take the next question?
Sure. We have another one. Aren't you scared? Aren't you worried your technology can be used for wrong purposes, deep sea mining, for example? And if so, how do you prevent this risk?
Oh, I'd like to take that one. So we have that written on our website, that the technology cannot be used to exploit or damage the oceans in any way, because we realized from when we started the company that the technology can also be easily used for oil and gas extraction. We also had various calls coming in, especially in the beginning, from, hey, great technology, let's use it for oil extraction and finding new places. But we just make a very clear cut. And so that's also why it's important when you have potential customers and you really look into, okay, what are they really after? That you do your own DD on them so that it also fits your ethical code. Because we as a company, we have a very strong ethical code that we're there to make the oceans healthier. We're not there to exploit them.
I'll just pick up and say I very much like Philippe's FAIR acronym. And I think the one that we tend to think about is as open as possible, as closed as necessary, as a way of data management to ensure that whatever and whoever needs to be protected can be protected.
Okay, we've got one more that came in from online. We see a lot of new technologies to better collect ocean data, eDNA, imagery systems, acoustics. What's the difference, and can these technologies be complementary?
Oh yes, they definitely are complementary. For instance, use technology to use electromagnetic optical signals. It has a very low range, but it gives very high detailed and a very high resolution imagery. Acoustics can be used at a wider range from the surface, so covering a big area. So this is definitely compatible. And we have also satellite imaging, which is more and more used. So we have to use every set of data. But once again, we have to ensure that we are not comparing apples and pears. This is critical. So, and the more data we have, the more the better is not always true in the world of artificial intelligence. Sometimes it's better to put the data in the garbage because we don't have any track of the parameter. So it's better not to use it. But it's hard to understand that when you collect data.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. So for data collection, especially the type of data that we do is very high detailed, you have to be really targeted because anything that you do underwater is expensive. So you want to make sure that you just get data that's really necessary to then extrapolate it to other useful data sets like satellite and aerial imagery. But there's another component that's not just data collection, it's also what happens then afterwards, because there's often a whole process of processing the data and presenting it to the customer, and often what we also experience, customers don't really know what kind of answers they want to have, questions they want to have answered. So there's a whole process. You need to be very targeted, and I also experienced it myself working on environmental impact analyses, where you do the data collection, you then wait for a couple of months to actually start looking at the data, then you process it, And then a year later, you have your results that you then bring to your customer, whoever it is. But the sea and the C4 is not just sitting still, so to say. They have seasons, things change, things happen. So time to data, ultimately, and that's one of the main things that we want to add with our technology, is critical so that you can also make informed decisions in a very quick pace and not just have to wait months for your results to take action.
It's exactly like the medical industry. Sometimes you need echography, sometimes you need RMI, sometimes you need to see the doctor and to talk with him. It's exactly the same thing.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. So, thank you.
Do we have time for one more question?
Does anyone else in the house have a question? If not, we've got one more from online. If you sell data, how can you make it accessible to all?
Well, like I said, you can sell data, but you can publish metadata, so information on your data products. And like I said, it's a huge step forward. Just at least that people know that this data product is out there. And then, the second step would be to contact data owners. But at least just publish, the fact that you have this data set, document the data product as much as possible so that others can make sense out of it.
Okay, well, thank you so much. That was really, truly insightful. Thank you for your time, the audience, and I think we're going to wrap up. So thank you.
Desiree, thank you so much for that. Thanks again to our panel. Please, I'll let you take your seats. All right, we are almost at the end of this Ocean Innovators platform. It's been 2 days of incredible and inspiring discussions and exchanges, all in the hopes of furthering ocean innovation. To close this year's edition of the Ocean Innovators platform, we're going to be hearing from Prince Albert II of Monaco in just a few minutes' time. If you could just stay seated and stay where you are for a few minutes, and when the Prince comes in, if you could all please stand to welcome him, that would be wonderful. Just please be patient. He'll be here in just a minute.